Good afternoon, folks. Now, today's discussion talks about nighttime behavior closely linked to dementia. So, here we go with the presentation I made. Sit back and enjoy, please. The night has always been a liminal space in interval where the mind loosens its grip on the world and the body yields to rest. For older adults, night can be fragile. Even in health, but in dementia, night becomes something else entirely. A, a diagnostic landscape, a behavioral crucible, and often the first place where the disease speaks in a voice that cannot be ignored. Families rarely begin their journey with dementia by reporting memory loss. They began with stories about the night. My mother keeps waking up and wandering. My husband is restless and agitated after sunset. My father insists he needs to go home at 2 a.m. These nighttime behaviors are not incidental. They are early psychotic expressions of neurodegeneration. Signals that the brain's internal clock is losing its ability to anchor itself in time. When night stops making sense, the earliest nighttime changes often appear subtle. A parent begins walking or waking repeatedly, padding down the hallway without knowing why. A spouse lies awake for hours, restless and unable to settle. A loved one goes to bed earlier and earlier, then stays in bed long past morning, as if the boundary between night and day has dissolved. These behaviors feel like aging at first, quirks, annoyances, the natural drift of sleep patterns, but they are not benign. They are early manifestations of a brain losing its temporal compass. The deterioration begins in the subplasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock. Slow wave sleep, the deep restorative stage that clears metabolic waste, fragments, amyloid, and tau accumulate in the very regions responsible for circadian regulation, creating a self reinforcing cycle. Disrupted sleep accelerates pathology, and pathology further disrupts sleep. Families witness wandering, agitation, pacing, or prolonged nighttime wakefulness. Clinicians see the underlying psychology, a brain struggling to maintain rhythm. Okay, guys, give me a second. Sundowning, the emotional weight of dusk. As daylight fades, confusion rises. This phenomenon is called sundown. Sundowning is so common it has become a clinical shorthand, but its emotional gravity is often underestimated. Shadows lengthen, and with them, the person's orientation slips. A father becomes convinced someone is in the house. A mother insists she must go home, though she is already there. A spouse begins pacing, opening and closing drawers, searching for something she cannot name. The caregiver tries to soothe, redirect, reassure, but the night stretches long and exhaustion accumulates. Sundowning is not simply agitation, it is the brain losing its ability to interpret the environment as familiar or safe. The caregiver's crucible. Nighttime behavior is one of the strongest predictors of caregiver burnout. It is also one of the most powerful predictors of institutionalization. Not because families love less, but because the human body cannot endure chronic sleep deprivation, hypervigilance, and the fear of what might happen if they fall asleep. Night becomes a crucible where safety, dignity, and endurance collide. Yet within these nights, there is profound tenderness. A daughter sits beside her mother's. A daughter sits beside her mother at 3 a.m., holding her hand as she drifts in and out of agitation. A husband gently guides his wife back to bed after her fifth wandering episode, whispering the same reassurance he has offered for decades. A son installs motion sensors and soft lighting, not to restrain, but to protect. These gestures, small, repetitive, loving, are the quiet architecture of caregiving. They are also acts of resistance against the disease's attempt to unravel connection. The science what nighttime behavior reveals about the brain. Clinically, nighttime behavior offers an early window into cognitive decline, even in people who appear cognitively normal. Increased nighttime awakenings, wandering, or prolonged time in bed correlate with biomarker changes. PTAU AB ratio elevation, hippocampal atrophy, limbic system dysfunction. Slow wave sleep disruption, altered melatonin secretion patterns, contactless sensors now used in research and increasingly in home-based monitoring detect dementia specific nocturnal signatures, increased bed exits, irregular sleep states, long total time in bed, abrupt changes signaling infection or delirium. The policy lens, why nighttime behaviors matter for health systems. For health systems, nighttime behavior is a sentinel event. It predicts higher emergency department utilization, increased caregiver distress, earlier long-term care placement, higher risk of falls, fractures, and nighttime injuries, accelerated functional decline. Yet the most dementia care pathways remain daytime centric, focused on clinical visits, cognitive testing, and daytime behaviors. Nighttime symptoms are treated as secondary, despite being among the earliest and most burdensome manifestations. A policy forward approach would integrate circadian focused screening into primary care, expand home based monitoring for high risk older adults, reimburse caregiver nighttime supports, fund light therapy, sleep stabilization programs, and behavioral interventions. Recognize that recognize nighttime behavior as a clinical indicator, not a caregiver anecdotes. Nighttime Nighttime behavior is a public health issue, not a private family struggle. The human story. What night teaches us about dementia. Nighttime behavior is where dementia becomes visible. It is where families confront the disease's unpredictability. It is where clinicians can detect decline early. It is where policy gaps become painfully clear, but it is also where love persists. Nighttime caregiving, intimate, repetitive, exhausting, and profoundly human. It is the work of keeping someone safe when their brain can no longer interpret the world. It is where the work of holding on to connection in the hours when disease is loudest. And it is a story we must learn to read. Formal, formal scientific format extended with methodological clarity, strengthened argument, argumentation, and polished for peer review. It remains your narrative's scientific voice while meeting academic conventions. Guided links are embedded naturally for future refinements. The nighttime behavior closely linked to dementia, a clinical, biological, and caregiving imperative. Nighttime behavioral disturbances, including wandering, agitation, prolonged wakefulness, and circadian rhythm. Disruption are among the earliest and most consequential manifestations of neurodegenerative disease. These behaviors often precede overt cognitive decline and correlate with measurable biomarkers changes, including alterations in slow wave sleep, uh, super charismatic nucleus dysfunction, and amyloid tau acceleration accumulation. Despite their prevalence and predictive value, nighttime symptoms remain under-recognized in clinical pathways and under-addressed in health system policy. This this manuscript synthesizes current evidence and integrates caregiving narratives and argues for the formal inclusion of nighttime behavior as a central clinical indicator in dementia. Okay, guys, give me a second. Okay, here we go. Dementia care models. Early identification and intervention may reduce caregiver burden, delay institutionalization, and improve patient safety and quality of life. Nighttime has long been recognized as a vulnerable period for older adults, but in dementia becomes a diagnostic frontier. Families rarely present with early memory complaints. Instead, they describe nocturnal wandering, agitation, and confusion. These behaviors are not incidental. They reflect early neuro biological changes and often precede measurable cognitive decline. The nighttime hours reveal dementia's earliest disruptions of rhythm. Orientation and internal timekeeping. Understanding these behaviors is essential for clinicians, caregivers, and health system system seeking to intervene earlier and more effectively. Pathology of nighttime behavior disturbance, circadian dysregulation, and the suprachiasmatic nucleus. The SCN, the brain's master circadian clock, undergoes early degeneration in Alzheimer's disease. SCN neural loss disrupts melatonin secretion, sleep-wake cycling, and the ability to maintain temporal orientation. Slow wave sleep fragmentation. Slow wave sleep, SWS, is critical for synaptic homeostasis and metabolic waste clearance. fragmentation of SWS is associated with increased amyloid B deposition, elevated PTAU AB ratio, reduced glymatic clearance, and altered accelerated hippocampal autophagy. Bidirectional relationship between sleep and pathology. Disrupted sleep accelerates amyloid accumulation, and amyloid accumulation further disrupts sleep. This bidirectional cycle makes nighttime behavior both a symptom and a driver of disease progression. Clinical presentation: sundowning. Sundowning, late day confusion, agitation, or disorientation, is a hallmark of dementia related nighttime disturbance. It reflects impaired environmental interpretation as visual cues diminish. Nocturnal wandering. Wandering is often triggered by master misinterpretation of surroundings, internal restlessness, loss of spatial memory, delusional beliefs, prolonged nighttime wakefulness. Patients may remain awake for hours, unable to initiate or maintain sleep. This contributes to daytime somnolence, functional decline, and caregiver exhaustion. Contactless sensor signatures. Emerging technology detects dementia-specific nocturnal patterns, increased bed exits, irregular sleep states, long total time in bed. Abrupt changes signaling infection or delirium. These signatures offer objective early markers for decline. Impact on caregivers. Nighttime behavior is one of the strongest predictors of caregiver burnout. It is also a leading cause of institutionalization. Caregivers experience chronic sleep deprivation, hypervigilance, and fear of nighttime injury or elopement. Emotional distress during sundowning episodes. Despite this, nighttime caregiving often remains invisible within clinical documentation and reimbursement structures, health system implications, predictive value. Nighttime disturbances predict increased emergency department utilization, higher risk of falls, earlier long-term care placement, accelerated functional decline, gaps in current care models. Most dementia care pathways are daytime centric. Nighttime symptoms are treated as secondary despite their predictive and clinical significance. Policy recommendations. Health systems should integrate circadian focused screening into primary care, reimburse nighttime caregiver supports, expand home-based monitoring programs, fund light therapy, sleep stabilization, and behavioral interventions. Recognize nighttime behavior as a clinical indicator, not a caregiver antidote. These changes would align care models with lived reality of dementia. Nighttime behavior is not merely a symptom of dementia, it is a psychologic expression of neurodegeneration and a lived experience that shapes caregiving, safety, and quality of life. Its early appearance makes it a powerful diagnostic and prognostic tool. Its burden makes a, it a clinical target for intervention, and clinicians must treat nighttime behavior as a core component of dementia. Okay, guys, that is A for you. I will be back on shortly with B. Give me a little bit for a break, please. I'll be back on with that for you shortly.